right. So welcome everyone to the How Did You Do This? How Did You Do That? Our new monthly series on artisans, designers, and artists who have turned their passion into a side hustle or a small business. This is our first program, so we're very excited to have some local makers with us. I'm going to give a few more minutes. Our program officially starts at 2, so I'm going to give a few minutes for people to join, so we're a little early. While we wait, I'm just going to go over a few things we have going on at the library. We are open here at the Beatley. I'm going to spotlight myself. We are open here at the Beatley Library every day, Monday through Thursday, 10 to 7, Friday and Saturday, 10 to 5, and Sunday, 1 to 5. We have online programs. We have a few in-person programs. We have an outdoor story time right now on Tuesdays. We have a Tai Chi that's meeting in our reading garden twice a month, as long as there's no snow. So be sure to check out our website for our programs that are going on currently. All Alexandria Reads is starting soon, so we're excited to join the community talking about Infinite Country and Crying in H Mart. Those are our adult picks. We also are doing our passport services, and we have had some rapid COVID tests delivered to us, but we are waiting on another shipment. So if you have questions about any of our programs or any of our service, please call our information desk and they'll be able to direct you. But yeah, we are open and operating as full as we can at this moment. All right. So it looks like we're just a minute here before the program starts. So I just want to welcome anyone else who's joined us. If this is your first time attending a library program on Zoom, welcome to our virtual programming. This is a webinar, so you won't be able to directly talk to our panelists, but if you have a question or if you have a comment, please feel free to put it in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You'll see a Q&A and it has speech bubbles, and you can type a question there and I'll ask the panelists at the appropriate moment, or you can put it in the chat. We will be recording this afternoon, so just so you're aware, I won't read anyone's names when they pose a question or anything like that, but if you please don't include any information that you won't want on the recording in your question. All right, well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first panelist for the series, How Did You Do That? Turning Your Passion into a Side Hustle. And we are kicking it off with the A team, from Apothecary to Apiary. We have Christina and Jason Bruegger of Alexandria Honeyco and Eddie Gonzalez of Apothecary Spices. Give me a moment here. So the format of this program is we're going to have our panelists give a short, talk about their origin story, how they started their business, how their passion grew to the point where they decided to start selling it to people. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, if you can put them in the Q&A or the chat as we go along, or you can hold them till the end. We have Eddie Gonzalez, who is a man of many interests, from scuba diving to leadership development and grilling and flavoring food. So he is the Apothecary Spices that you can find in Alexandria. And we also have Christina and Jason, who are the Alexandria Honey Company. And I found out from some research that they bought their first, or they started beekeeping while starting a family at the same time. So I am super impressed with that sort of initiative, and I'm excited to hear how that worked out and how it's going now. So I think we'll go ahead and we'll start with you, Eddie.
Great, thanks for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I really love being a small business in Alexandria. It's a fun dynamic to be a part of and a community to be a part of. I guess my origin story starts with a house that I moved into back in my late 20s with a bunch of guys. It had a grill that had a main line right into the gas line. So there was no propane to deal with, and that set up a scenario where we started grilling all the time. anything that we could find, we would throw on the grill for dinner. And, at some point I found myself being the go-to griller, leaning towards three specific seasonings: garlic powder, lemon pepper, and seasoned salt, and found myself just having those be my go-to. Rather than using them all individually, I decided to just make a blend out of the three, and that became my go-to spice. Around that time, there was a place around here called World Market, I think it's still around, that allowed you to would sell individual spice jars. So I got this idea about bottling my own spice blend and giving it out as gifts. And that became pretty popular. I had friends that would come and go, that would come back and ask me for my spice blend. This was around the time that the Lord of the Rings series was also coming out. So the name that I gave my blend was Eye of Newt. And that kind of added to the appeal and just the novelty of being able to come up with my own blend. So I did that for about 15 years of just giving it out as gifts, and got a pretty wide audience and circulation amongst my friends. And at one point decided or got talked into thinking about going commercial. But I had this one blend. I knew I needed more brand and more pieces behind the brand. So I came up with the name Apothecary Spices, trying to conjure up this image of an ingredient that can really transform what you're cooking, building off of, again, the Lord of the Rings series that was still on. Now, the three spices, part of the rationale with that was that I grew up in South Texas, and back home, grilling really just involves chopping down part of a mesquite tree, burning it down to coals, shoveling the coals into the grill, and salt and pepper. And I could never figure out why my food would never taste like my parents. And it clicked that it was the mesquite that I was missing. So for me, my spices became the how can I substitute that flavor, and ended up coming up with a blend that I find really unique and works really well across, from tater tots to French fries to steak, fish, and meat. So that really allowed me to have a product that I was confident in, and then start developing this brand of Apothecary Spices. So after that, I came up with other blends, and then my original market was Comic-Cons. So I would go to all the area Comic-Cons, and I would be that unique, hey, somebody's selling spices at this thing vendor. And that got, word of mouth going, and eventually just became a nice local brand. Since then, I have transitioned to more commercially friendly names. People were getting a little confused as to what I was selling, whether it was potpourri or decoration. So now my names are pretty standard. My grilling and roasting spice, my citrus herb blend, but they're all still flavors that I use. And I enjoy both having a product that I can put out into the universe, and then the feedback that I get of folks that enjoy using it in their kitchens. So it's a fun way to be in the food business. It's a low risk way of being in the food business, but because it's a product I use, I like that, I have my name on it, and that it's a brand that I'm confident in. So yeah, that's my origin story.
Thank you. I really love that Comic-Con entry point into the market.
Yes, I still have friends that will email me, old customers that have been with me since the beginning, that lament that I have changed my brand names, and they still have some of my old posters that they framed and hung up as artwork. So it's fun to still get to dabble in the Comic-Con world as a former vendor.
Cool. Well, here, Christina, we'll turn the spotlight over to you. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Yep. Sorry.
Oh, there we go. It's okay.
So we're Christina and Jason Bruegger. We are the owners of Alexandria Honey Company. And our story started about 5 years ago. We had been renting, and I really, really wanted to get honeybees. I thought it would be a lot of fun to have a hive. Seemed like sort of as a wannabe homesteader, an easy way to do that in a more urban environment. And so I was bound and determined that once we bought a house, we were going to get a beehive. And as you mentioned, as it turned out, when that happened, I was also pregnant. So I was going to the beekeeping class, getting larger, and then started second guessing myself after a while, but we went forward with it. And so I was out there that first summer, 9 months pregnant, poking around a beehive, which was an experience. So that was 2017 when we got our first hive. And it was never intended to be a business. It was just something that we thought would be fun to do. So unfortunately, the bees that year, both just because we were new at this and didn't really know what we were doing, and because we were otherwise occupied, our hive didn't make it that first year. So we had to start again in 2018. We bought more bees, and ever since then, it's been smooth sailing. And even still, we were just looking to have a couple of hives. We wanted some honey for ourselves, to give as gifts, to give to our neighbors. But bees have a way of multiplying, like most creatures, and our hives expanded. And then we really threw ourselves into beekeeping during the pandemic because we were both home a lot more, and just really got involved. Whereas initially it had been more of my hobby, Jason got more involved over time, and things just started growing. And at the beginning of this year, we realized that we were on track to produce a lot of honey. We already had honey left over from last year. And we were looking at the number of hives we had, because we were up to,
I think we went last winter, we went into the winter with 5 hives and then a small nucleus hive. So we went into winter with more hives than we had ever had before. And we were sitting on the couch about this time last year, and I must have been poking around the cabinet where we store in our kitchen, and realized that we had somewhere in the vicinity of 5 gallons of honey. And in a few more months, we were going to be harvesting more honey than we've ever would have had before, because of the number of hives that we were going to have. So we kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, what are we going to do with all of this honey? We had been giving it away. We had been, giving it to friends and family and eating it in every way that we could here at home. And that's kind of what led the discussion of, well, we could probably sell this. I mean, local raw honey is a sought after commodity. And that's kind of what born the Alexandria Honey Company. Over the subsequent few months, we kind of dove into the workings of starting a small local business and setting up the name and the websites and the infrastructure. And that's how we've kind of gotten to today.
Yeah, and then we have transitioned a bit though, because like we said, initially it was just to sell our excess honey. But as we realized, you put in all the work up front to establish a business, and we wanted to do more with it, because our capacity to produce honey is limited by both our time. Beekeeping is a pretty time intensive hobby, but also our space. We have a pretty big lot for Alexandria, but even still, we're in an urban environment. We have neighbors. We can only keep so many hives on our property responsibly, I would say. So we can only ever produce so much honey. And we realized that as a business, it's great to have a hobby that pays for itself. I think it's probably what we all aspire to. So it was nice to have some income coming from that honey, but we realized that there was also a market we could expand into, which is beeswax candles. So that's something that we had been dabbling with just for ourselves with the wax that we had produced previously. But then this past summer, we really dove into exploring more, making different kinds of candles. We can only produce so much wax ourselves. So that's something that we have to source from other beekeepers. All of the honey we sell, we produce ourselves. We source beeswax from elsewhere and then make candles, because we noticed that not only did we have beeswax and some of the expertise to do it, but we realized as we looked around the city that you can't really find beeswax candles that easily. Here and there at a farmer's market, you might, but if you go into stores in Old Town, you're not going to see too many beeswax candles. So we thought that was a really cool opportunity for us to then sort of make it more of an actual business.
Yeah.
So just selling honey is going to pay for our expenses, but then to actually go further with it, we felt like moving into beeswax was the way to go.
Yeah, so that's kind of how we started and kind of where we got to today. So today, Alexandria Honey Company, we carry honey from our apiary here in the west end of Alexandria, but we also make and produce beeswax candles. And we're really excited about this year in particular, because we are continuing to expand the beeswax related goods that we're going to be offering. We're experimenting with other beeswax products. So that's pretty exciting for us. So we just kind of have dove headfirst into all of these various ventures, whether it's the honey and the managing and keeping of the bees, to the making of beeswax candles, to the other products that we are exploring under our company.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting. So I have a few questions that I'm going to sort of pose to both of you, and I see some questions coming in through the chat. So if everyone wants to just keep posting questions, and I'll get to participant questions in just a second. Let me just add Eddie to our view. But my first question is, since both of you seem to have this small business sort of alongside your life and alongside your main job, how do you decide to spend your most important resource, your time? Do you make a budget? Do you decide how much time you're going to spend on beekeeping or making spices? Or do you just have an amount of tasks and try to get it done? How do you budget that resource in your life? And if the honey company wants to go first while I try to add Eddie back into my spotlight, that would be great.
That's something we should probably do a bit more consciously.
Budgeting time.
When it comes to the beekeeping, it's a very seasonal thing. So spring, it's going to ramp back up. And then until we harvest honey in late June, early July is like the really critical time for beekeeping. It tapers off into the summer and fall, and the winter is pretty slow. So as far as the bees themselves, we just do what we have to do, however much time that takes. And honestly, it does take a lot of time.
It takes a lot of time. And when we hit here in the springtime, and it's going to require, once to twice a week working with the bees, managing them. It's Mother Nature, and it's what we're trying to do as beekeepers is to control Mother Nature, which is very difficult to do, obviously. So it's a very busy time. Like Christina said, once we hit the springtime, we'll have a few months of a lot of work into the summer when we do our harvest. Like she said, usually 4th of July, give or take a week or two on either end. Once the harvest is over and we get into the hot part of the summer, as a beekeeper, the work kind of dissipates a little bit. There's definitely things that we're looking out for and doing, but it's not as heavy of a task. And then when we roll into the fall, it picks up for a few weeks as we get the bees ready to roll into winter. And then now when we're into the winter months, it's a pretty slow pace. But the other aspect of it then is the beeswax candles and the other products that we're testing and making ourselves in-house. And that, we spend a lot of time working on that. It's a passion. It's something that we enjoy. It's our hobby. So we spend a fair amount of time, usually in the evenings after the kids, after the kids go to bed, is usually when we do, a lot of the social media, the photography, the posting to our website and our various, social media platforms. I kind of throughout the day, putz around here and there with stuff, but usually in the evenings is when I'll ramp up making candles or just doing other aspects of the business, like wrapping candles or whatnot. So it's kind of an evening thing after the kids are in bed, and then the weekends.
Cool. And then the same question to you, Eddie. How do you budget your time with Apothecary spices?
Time-wise, it usually goes in waves of when I need to restock. I know pretty well in advance of how my inventory is going, whether it's online sales or at farmers markets. I have been fortunate to now have gotten into a couple of retail arrangements. I did a pop-up over the last 2 months with Made in ALX down in the waterfront. So that involved a lot more, not just gauging the inventory I had in-house, but having to keep track of what inventory I had out. And I'm starting a new relationship with a group out in Vienna that deals with local homemade stuff. So time-wise, it's more of responding to when I need to restock up. The bigger issue for me is my ingredients and inventory. I always have to be mindful of how much raw product I have and containers, and then how much mix I have, and then how much bottled product I have. And making sure that the supplies and materials that I have are available especially with COVID. My one go-to supplier for my 4-ounce bottles that I use the most of, they ran out right at the beginning of the pandemic and haven't had them in inventory since. So I'm constantly having to make sure that I have enough of everything along my supply chain in-house, because if any one thing is missing, it bottlenecks the rest, my ability to put more product out there. And sometimes I have lost track and something isn't available and I'll have to put a product on hold. So it's more keep being mindful and ordering ahead while still keeping track of how much I can store here.
And you dovetailed right into my next question was, I know that you're both relatively new companies, so I'm not sure how much the pandemic has had an effect on you as you're still sort of figuring things out. But I did want to ask, because one thing we all hear about are like supply chain issues, especially with COVID. So I was just wondering, as a small business, how do you decide on a supplier? Are there times where you have to take a chance and buy in bulk? Or have you learned lessons over the pandemic or over starting your business on how you keep your supplies stocked and stuff like that of that nature? Eddie, if you want to go first, since you were already delving in.
Sure. Yes, I do have a number of different sources now for each individual product. I get them from my go-to in most of the categories, whether it's bottles or labels. I have to get the seals that go inside the tamper-proof seal. That's from one specific vendor because my other person, the caps don't come with it. So trying to find multiple sources for each individual product, has been something that I've had to rely on more. And then making sure that the quantities are available enough from when I'm going to need them. At one point, I actually had companies calling me asking if I had any excess bottles to sell back because folks were getting really desperate. It's settled out a little bit, I've seen. But it does require you to stay on top of it. I can't hope that if I need something today, I'm going to be able to order it tomorrow and get it next week. Sadly, Amazon becomes a backup for a lot of things, but that's probably 2 or 3 times the price of something that if I planned ahead, I'd be able to get. Beyond that, I've done a lot more marketing. I did change over all my names and my branding during the pandemic. So, put a little bit more money investment, didn't do as much selling, but now I have a product that's more commercially viable. And I'm still tentative on some products. There's some things that I've been coming out with on as far as new packaging that I haven't really put a big emphasis on yet, because I don't want to go full steam on that when the market really isn't ready yet, versus waiting till folks start getting out and about again. So some things I'm holding back, but the pandemic has allowed me a little more time to think about how I want to market, what kind of stories do I want to tell, and what kind of conduits do I want to sell through.
And then same to you, Christina and Jason.
Yeah, sure. I would say the pandemic is probably what allowed us to start our business and get to the point that we're at now. As far as the supply chain goes, we've been pretty fortunate in the beekeeping world. As far as like our woodenware and things of that nature, we have a really great relationship with a beekeeper from my home state of Ohio that lives in the Amish country. He makes all of his own woodenware, and we have a really great relationship with him in getting us the supplies that we need whenever we need them. And usually we'll make a big bulk order and stop by and visit him when we go back to visit my folks in Ohio. So it's kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And then as far as like the candle side of the house, we've been pretty fortunate, in obtaining the things that we need to make candles. That's a newer venture for us. So we were using, we only use wax produced here by bees in the United States. We only bottle our honey and things of that nature with USA made products. And as far as the beeswax that we are obtaining, we were sourcing it from some local beekeepers out of New Jersey. We're starting to forge a relationship with a beekeeper that works out of Florida and South Dakota. And they're a pretty awesome outfit that we're excited to be joining. They share a lot of the same principles of beekeeping that we do as far as sustainability and the way that they manage and run their hives. So we're starting to broker a relationship with them for wax, and they have a few years worth of wax kind of saved up because they ran out a few years ago, and that kind of hurt their business. So they've been conscious to have a good supply. And the other raw materials, wicks and packaging materials, we really haven't had too many issues, fortunately, it's, with the supply chain, getting the things that we need to put together. I think our biggest problem is we tend to have great ideas at the 11th hour, and then we're scrambling to get products, put together and ready for an event. As Eddie mentioned, he has participated with Made in ALX. We did as well. We're part of the Made in ALX family of makers, and they've been a really blessing to our company, because really we move a lot of our product through the Made in ALX banner. But for us, supply chain hasn't been too much of an issue.
How about product testing? You guys have both kind of touched on this, but how do you decide, like, okay, this is a spice blend that I think that will sell. This is, wax candles. How did you know that was an untapped market that people were interested in? Do you do market research? Do you use family and friends? Do you ever just wing it? Just put it out there, see if it goes? Whoever wants to go first is fine. Eddie?
Sure. I'm at the point now where every spice I have, every blend that I have is a blend that I use. So they're all in the flavor profiles that I would, gravitate towards. And that makes it very easy to sell them because I know exactly how I would use them, and it becomes an easy conversation. I have been asked to come up with a sweet blend. So I've been toying with a cinnamon sugar that you'd use on like cinnamon toast or cocoa. But with that kind of thing, I know there are other products like that out there. So trying to find one that makes it unique to me is where the angle would be. Like I'm toying with a cinnamon sugar that has cayenne pepper and it tastes like Red Hots. That's something that at some point I will make. The harder limitation for me ends up actually being the branding. That I know any new blend I come up with is gonna mean another trip to the designer and another trip to the printer to get food quality labels produced. So I do go through quite a lot of putting out little sample pouches or giving gifts to friends, seeing if it's something that will take off before I'll commit to it. I think right now I'm more focused on how to package my spices in ways that makes them more usable. So I'm working on a little, my sampler kit I'm now turning into a backpacker's kit that can be branded and be go-to for backpackers. So taking more advantage of the fact that I have some diversity of flavors, how can I package them in ways that are a little bit more in need in various different communities.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah. And then Christina, so same question to you. How do you guys do product testing? Or
the honey, it's honey. Everyone knows what honey is. I think the only piece we have to do there is just the benefits of local honey that has all of the local pollen in it and that it's raw and unprocessed compared to what you might find in the grocery store, which is why there's a price differential there. So that the honey really sells itself, honestly. It's not something that we have to do too much. The candles were different. So if most candle makers use soy wax and they're scented candles, and that's what people have come to, I think, expect. Everyone knows how to use a candle in a jar and you light it and it makes your house smell pretty. And so we sort of just jumped in on the beeswax candles. We didn't do any kind of market research. And actually we've I think made a few mistakes along the way because of that, but we're learning as we go. The advantage that we have, I think, compared to Eddie, is that wax is reusable. So if we make a whole bunch of one kind of candle and it doesn't sell, we can melt that wax down and reuse it for something else, whereas you can't take those spices apart again. So that's given us a certain amount of flexibility that has really benefited us. And just to give you an example, when we were figuring out, like just getting started and trying to decide what candles to start with, my bright idea was that, well, everyone has been to Yankee Candle and bought a candle in a jar and knows how to use it. So let's make a beeswax version. And we do everything unscented because we're not big scent people. Like it,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I mean, the hole in the market is there's a lot of soy candles. Any store you go into Old Town or they're just filled with shelves and shelves of scented soy candles. And we're just not big scent people, whether it's perfumes, whether it's, you know, candles or anything else. So we kind of started making candles for ourselves because we like the ambiance in the mood lighting of a candle, but we didn't really like, to us, some of the harsher scents that you can sometimes get with a candle. So that's why we started making beeswax candles, because they have a very natural, very light, you know, honey fragrance of the beeswax. They don't smoke, and they give you all that great ambiance without some of the heavy perfumes. So that's kind of how we started with down the road of beeswax candles.
but I thought, well, let's do something that people are familiar with. But we found that when people pick up a candle in a jar, they're expecting it to have a certain scent.
Smell, yeah.
And that's what we weren't providing. And so we found that those actually didn't sell that well.
Yeah.
We do better with pillar candles. So just to give you some examples, things that you don't tend to see in other kinds of waxes that are unique to beeswax. So now we still have the jar candles because some people do like them, but we're focusing our efforts more on other sorts of candles that differentiate us from what's out there, rather than trying to do a beeswax version
Right.
of what's out there.
And I think into the testing aspect of the product, right? I mean, like Christina mentioned, there's not much testing in terms of the honey. I mean, we test it for moisture content. So after the harvest, we make sure that we use the various tools to make sure that the honey is at the right moisture content. But other than that, most of our testing is in the candle making realm. So every candle that we produce, so this is an example of another one. It's a cute little pillar candle that has little bees on the side of it. Like a candle like this, you know, we have to test this with different wicks. So we make a candle like this, and we start out with a general kind of idea of a wick size, and then we burn it. A candle like this can take upwards of 40 hours to burn. So we have a lot of time invested in burning this candle, and we have a methodical process to take notes and so forth, to see, is the flame too big? Is it too small? Is the wax tunneling? And so we kind of go through this process, and then if that wick isn't something that we enjoy because it's producing too big of a flame, too small of a flame, it's tunneling, or there's other issues you can run into, then we have to make another one and start all over again. So one candle can be many hours of testing before we feel confident in that product enough to go into making it, in more of a scale to sell to the public. So the candles do take quite a bit of testing. But like Christina said, if something's not working out, we can just melt it down and make another candle out of it. So that's kind of where a lot of our testing is in the candle realm.
Interesting. I had no idea that candle testing had so many different words, actually. So this question is actually coming from our participants too. And that is, what point of, or is there a point of growth that you're looking at your business where you would leave your job? And then there's conversely, because this is sort of, talking about small businesses, is there something that would happen that would have you close your small business? On either side, do you have benchmarks for those sorts of things? Or since this is a passion project that you've already commercialized, or you're just going to run it out to the end? What are your thoughts on that? And whoever wants to go first, I think Christina, you're already unmuted.
Yeah, so I would say we're not at all close to leaving our paying jobs. I mean, we do have aspirations that this could be financially lucrative, that, it could help, pad a college fund for our kids. Like we do want to take it somewhere. we're just so new, and it's just been such a whirlwind that we haven't really sat down and mapped out, well, we know how we need to grow, but we haven't set specific financial goals in terms of, oh, well, one of us can quit our job when we hit X point. Like we haven't mapped it out that far. Although that's actually something that would be good to do, I suppose. But at this point, we're just kind of seeing where it takes us. On the other side, as far as closing it, I don't know. I mean, I'd say beekeeping is a very manual hobby. So there are certainly, health situations, or if, something was just going on in our family that we couldn't devote the time to it, I could see a situation where maybe beekeeping wouldn't be viable for us. That said, the beeswax candles, because we can produce that with wax from other beekeepers, that's something that would be easier to keep going, even in the event of something else coming up in the family. So I hope we can keep it going. It's certainly our intention.
I think if it ever became a job, if it ever became a situation where I just dreaded making a candle or didn't want to go mess with the bees, I think that's when we would probably think, because again, this was just started as a fun, a side hustle. We've always been aspiring entrepreneurs, but we have, good day jobs that we really enjoy and are passionate about. So this is just kind of something that's a hobby that we just kind of turned into, a little bit of a side business. But yeah, I think if it ever became something that we're not having fun with it right now, we're having a lot of fun with it. And I think we will continue to, but like Christina said, keeping bees is a lot of work. It's very hot in the summertime. The bees sometimes can get a little testy in the summertime. So some of that becomes not so fun. But we really enjoy all the aspects right now. So I think for right now, we're in a great spot with, and as far as quitting jobs, we'd have to get pretty darn successful at selling beeswax candles. The honey, we're only ever going to produce so much honey, which is not going to be very much because of, just it's the two of us. We have full-time jobs and kids. So it would really have to be the candle side of the house, and the other products that we're experimenting with would have to really take off for us to probably leave one of our careers.
Yeah, I'm probably in a similar boat. I do love working on this. I love that it's a product that I can put out into the universe, but I don't see it taking the level of scale where it would become a full-time endeavor. I think as far as benchmarks, my goals would be to grow it enough where I could potentially hire staff to help run it, where I'm still focused on the marketing and the branding piece of it, but the production, all the fulfillment, all that would be done by individuals. There's no real negative to continuing to own the brand and maintain it, even if sales aren't what I'm expecting. I do benefit from, I could always box up everything, put it on a shelf, close down for 2 years, and the branding would all still be available to me if I just start to pick things back up again. So I think for me, it would be more a limitation of life circumstances. If for some reason I wasn't in a situation where I could, bottle it myself or get some assistance to help bottle and sell. Those would really be the only things that would keep me from keeping it going. Beyond that, it's just, there's a lot more that I can do with it. I know the day job and all the other stuff I do does impact my ability to put more time and effort into it. But I also like the fact that for every effort I put into the spice business, I will get a return for it. And knowing that there's a lot more in that category of things that I could be doing keeps me motivated and keeps this not just a hobby, but something that I am still treating like a business. I think down the road, I think I more see somebody buying the brand from me, regardless of the blends. I'm realistic enough to know that these blends are special to me because I use them, but somebody else could fill them with an entirely different blend, keep my product names and my branding, and probably have just as much success. Montreal steak seasoning, there's go-tos that everybody has. So flavors, there's such a variety out there that I like what I put behind my ingredients and my recipes. And I just think that I could continue to maintain that as long as it's a product that I'm confident in using myself.
That's great. Do you have any advice for people looking to start their own business? When you're starting your own business, you can be overwhelmed by business types, tax forms, legal documents, and then pricing your own products. How did you, I know there's a lot in this question, and I realize now that pricing your products, probably should have put that one in market developing. But you know, you live, you learn, right? Even when you're running a library program. But how did you guys start, especially since you're sort of in like the food industry? Were there health code violations, or I mean health code like standards that you had to meet? What sort of paperwork, legal work, and like health things did you have to overcome to start selling to people?
For me, it kind of was on two categories. Everything on the creative side. So from the name of the company, the messaging, tagline, what kind of stories did I have as part of my background that I was going to put behind it, and then all the kind of administrative regulatory stuff. You know, the LLC formation to me was pretty simple. It's a form online that you can fill out. You pay the fee, you get registered, and then there's the state version of it. Being on my side as a food-based business, it's a home-based business. So I did have somebody from the Virginia Department of Agriculture have to come to my home and inspect my kitchen, inspect my process. Everything has to be written out. I have maps of my entire production area that has to be logged in with the state. But once you do all that, I'm considered a very low-risk business because I'm not dealing with heat, meat, acid, any sort of raw ingredients. So once they give you that initial stamp, there's not a lot of cause for folks to come back and keep up on me as long as my paperwork stays up to date. I do have to register every year with the Alexandria Department of Health. Also, you know, it's just a standard form. I submit all my procedures and then get a certificate that allows me to sell at farmers markets and all the local fairs. But, you know, that's the other fortunate piece about my business. I'm not cooking anything. I'm not dealing with raw ingredients. So all the regulatory pieces on my end tend to be pretty easy to maintain. There is cost to having insurance. You know, I have my own health insurance, but I have liability insurance for the company. And then just the incidental costs of all the transaction fees that you have to factor in. You know, I think for me, I still am challenged with price points. In some markets, mine are very low priced. I'll go to other places that are more crafty, and mine are pretty, you know, on the premium side. So depending on the conduit, I think I could vary my prices a lot more, and that's something to consider. But you know, I go back to it's fulfilling a creative impulse for me, but it's also fulfilling an entrepreneurial impulse in me. I like being part of a small business community here, but I like doing it with a product that I use and you know, can put my name behind.
For us, I handle most of the business side of things. And when we were getting started, I had done a lot of research online looking to see, you know, how did we want to set ourselves up? What did you have to do? We used, I think, LegalZoom to set up the LLC. But what I actually found really helpful that I just kind of stumbled across was the Alexandria Small Business Development Council, I think it's called, SBDC. And they were phenomenal. Mm-hmm. I had actually already done a lot of the paperwork, but I wasn't super confident that that I wasn't missing something. And so you can actually register with them, set up an appointment with them, and they will talk you through every single step of the process. And because you give them information ahead of time, they can even provide guidance specific to your business and your product. It was so immensely helpful. I took pages of notes. They followed up with a written email that laid out everything we had talked about and links to all the forms and things to be mindful of. They sent lists of local like accountants and bookkeepers who are used to dealing with small businesses in the city. They know everything specific to the city, that, you know, things that you might have to do if you live in the city of Alexandria versus if you live in Fairfax County. It was just so incredibly helpful. So I cannot recommend that as a resource enough. As far as pricing, the honey, it's I mean, there is some variability in local honey, but there's just sort of a price that
it depends on what you mean by local too. I mean, the folks that keep bees further south in Virginia, up north in Maryland, or out west towards West Virginia, they tend to charge a little bit less at the markets and so forth for their honey. As you get closer into the district and this part of Northern Virginia, the prices tend to be pretty similar across beekeepers. So it's a pretty standard fee. Within a buck or two, you're going to find most honey going for a similar rate. I think when it comes to the candles, that's been a learning curve. Yeah, that's harder because, you know, that you can find beeswax candles online, just like you can find anything online. But as far as local goes, we haven't stumbled across too many beeswax candles locally. So we're still, I would say we're still in a kind of a testing phase of, you know, are things selling? Are they not selling? And trying to figure out, is it because of the price point? So, you know, we've done the research that we can to try to price them at a fair price point, because beeswax is way more expensive being a natural product than soy wax. So producing a equally sized beeswax candle to a soy candle is much more expensive. So that's why beeswax candles tend to carry a higher price tag than like a soy candle is. So we're still kind of in that phase of trying to feel out the market place on the candle side, and trying to come up with, I think, what we feel is a good price point on our candles, where we can offer something that we're passionate about at a good price that people will enjoy and purchase them at.
And we're also actively working to lower our costs, and that's part of the learning curve of the business. And we have been initially hesitant to buy too much in bulk because we weren't sure what was going to sell and we didn't want to invest too much. And now that we're on firmer footing, we have a better sense of things. We're working to make larger purchases to lower our costs, which will then be
we can pass on.
In the prices.
And I mentioned earlier, we're starting a new relationship with a new wax supplier. And that's been huge because they have the capacity to fill much larger orders of wax at one time. And the price point that we're able to purchase that wax is considerably lower than what we were buying it in smaller dribs and drabs before, when we were just kind of testing things out. And that has actually allowed us to lower our prices across the board on all of our products. Not only are they more profitable for us, but there's also, we're able to pass a lot of that on to the consumer as well.
All right, so from some of the participants, we have two questions still kind of about money here. So how did you receive funding to start your business? And if you did, where and how did you find it, and how did you apply for it? And then the other is, do you pay yourself out of your business? Eddie, do you want to go first?
Sure. I do not pay myself out of the business. I mean, as a LLC, everything's kind of commingled for tax as far as when I report my income to taxes. But beyond that, it's really everything I get in goes right back in to the business. I didn't get any initial funding. I started incrementally enough that I was able to put my own money behind it. I started with making my own labels on my inkjet printer, buying bottles from World Market, and then stepping up along the way. As Christina was mentioning, the bulk, being able to buy in bulk adds a threshold of cost saving. And I'm not at the point in a lot of the things that I get where I'm getting enough bulk savings because I can't store. So you're still having to be mindful of those costs and how they get factored into your revenue. But beyond that, I've avoided doing any sort of loan. I know it's out there for me, and I would consider it at a point where I'm ready to scale up. For me, scaling up would be renting a commercial kitchen. So I'm taking this out of my house potentially, and or a commercial rental space where I have my own production facility there. So I'm kind of waiting until I'm at that point before I would consider any sort of small business funding. Beyond that, I've been fortunate that I can sustain the cost with putting with what it takes to run it. I will put a plug in as well for the Alexandria Small Business Council office. They are great. They would be a great starting point for anybody looking to see if this is for them. The other group that I would recommend on the food-based side is Frontier Kitchen out in Lorton. It's a commercial kitchen that a lot of folks use in the area, and they run classes on running food-based businesses, how to set up a food-based business budget, a lot of those kinds of administrative things that people may not know about. Yeah.
What was the question again?
It's okay.
We were
We
too
were
busy
distracted.
writing down Frontier Kitchen.
It's so the question was about funding. So did you
Oh, that's
receive
right.
any startup funding, or did you apply for a loan? And then also, do you pay yourself out of your business?
Yeah, we don't pay ourselves out. We're still small scale, that everything just gets rolled right back in. We did not receive any funding because we built up our beekeeping over a number of years. That's just something that we invested in as a hobby over the 5 years we've been doing this. And then it worked out well for us because we have the equipment. And then as we started selling honey this year, the only investment we had to make was the bottles and labels. So I think we transferred a couple, I think $2,000 over our business account, just so that was like we consider that sort of our personal investment in the business, to buy some of that initial stuff that we needed. And then as we've been able to sell honey, then that has allowed us to operate completely out of that account and order wax and all the supplies we need. But ultimately it is, like Eddie said, it's an LLC. So it all is really commingled for tax purposes. So, and like Eddie said, I think for us, because we can work in small batches, we don't really need funding unless we did want to go to a bigger space, because right now we're in our garage, which is why it's not the prettiest background. This is our workspace. And we've been talking about just how insane it is. And we need to get a shed, we need something because we need more space. And so for us to like really scale up, the same thing, we would need some sort of, I don't know, workspace that we would have to rent. And that would be where we would potentially be looking for funding.
For us, it's the garage. The garage is where I work from home. It's for my day job. It's where we keep the kids' bikes. It's a walls full of beehive boxes and beehive and bee equipment. It's, boxes of wax and candle wick. It's everything right now. Tools for building projects. So I think we don't take a paycheck. Everything goes back into the business. And we ever get to a point where the candle side really takes off, I think that's when we would probably be talking loans and things like that to get bigger, more commercial size spaces.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So we just have a few quick kind of fun questions, I guess, here at the end. So this one is for you, Eddie. What was the name of your first spice blend?
My first spice blend was Eye of Newt. And it was trying to be that magical ingredient kind of feeling. From there, I went to my spicy blend was Dragon's Breath, and my extreme spicy blend was Dragon's Bite. My herb blend was Wing of Bat. So in my mind, I kept trying to conjure up these connections to magical ingredients and stuff that would sound familiar. I took a few of the names from Macbeth. And it did give me a certain amount of uniqueness, again, because of those Comic-Con venues. And I became the easy thing to purchase when everything around me is $20, $30, $40 pieces of art, and I've got the $5 spice jar that you're buying at a Comic-Con. That made it pretty easy. Since then, I've gone a little more commercial. So I have my grilling and roasting spice, my spicy pepper, my citrus herb. I've lost a little bit of that uniqueness, but it allows me now to talk to a lot more people about what I'm doing and what to use it for.
Yeah. And then to Christina, how did you start when you were learning to make candles, and how did you learn all of your skills? From beekeeping to making candles? Are they YouTubes, or it sounded like you went to a class for beekeeping?
Yeah, I would highly recommend that if anybody is interested in beekeeping, take a class. So there's a number of bee associations. We belong to the Northern Virginia Beekeepers Association, and they offer a class every year. So when I did it, it was 2 Saturdays for 5 or 6 hours each, and they hold your hand through the entire process, teach you about bees. teach you just the fundamental skills needed to take care of a hive, get you set up as far as this is what you need to purchase and this is where you get it from, this is how much it'll cost. And the critical thing there is they also hook you up with a mentor. So someone else in the club who's been keeping bees for a few years. And that was just critical because
Yeah.
I called him
all the
constantly.
time. Yeah, he's
for
still a
couple years.
resource for us. Yeah.
So I mean, we do, Jason in particular tends to watch YouTube or, you know, you look things up on the internet. There's a lot of Facebook forums, like different places you can go for advice. But I find like most things you ask for an advice in a public forum and you will get many answers, many that are diametrically opposed. You're like, well, what am I supposed to do? So it's a lot of trial and error, just figuring it out as you go. The candles has definitely been much more self-taught, and Jason is really the candle guru. That's a lot of videos, just trying things, see what works. If it doesn't turn out, melt it down and try again.
Yeah. It's just removing the fear of failing, you know. I mean, and so I don't, you know, if I make a candle and I don't like the way it looks or it doesn't burn right, that's okay. You know, I learn from it, I take notes, and then I melt it down and make another one and try and change a variable to see if I can get a better result. You know, with the bees, you know, the barrier to entry there is, you know, it is costly to get into beekeeping, even if you're just going to get one hive, and you have to get past any fear that you might have of getting stung. And then with the candles, it's, you know, I'm a big YouTube watcher, so I subscribe to more on the beekeeping side. Some beekeepers there's some really good channels out there for beekeeping that I like to just watch, and then, you know, you pick up a couple things here and there. But really, in both the candle making and the beekeeping, it's just, you know, not being afraid to fail and just jumping in and experimenting and trying to do your best to learn, you know, because we've certainly made mistakes on both ends, you know, with the bees. You know, we make mistakes every year and we think we got it licked the next year, then
Something
you know,
else
they do
pops up.
something. You know, the bees don't read the handbook. We read the textbooks. The bees don't read the textbooks. They do what they're going to do. They do what they want to do. So you think you've got them pegged this year. We're going to do it, you know, this time of the year, we're going to do this and we're going to do A, B, and C because last year it was this, and they do something completely different. So it's just a matter of, you know, learning each year, and we hope to get a little bit better every time we do something.
Cool. I really like that. Don't be getting over your fear of failure. So just real quick before we close up, looking back, is there anything you wish you had known before you started your business? And then just to kind of keep it, you know, clean and happy ending, is there anything you would never change, like in any parallel universe, like that you're happy has happened in this process of starting your new business or continuing your hobby as a business? Let me know if you need clarification on that question. But Christina, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I guess as far as what I wish we had known, I guess it's just, we started very small scale. Like we weren't thinking big at all. It was literally, let's just sell our extra honey.
Yeah.
And we were not thinking beyond that. And then as a result, it seems like we've just been scrambling the past 6 months because opportunities have come up and, you know, we want to take advantage of that, but then we need to have things to sell. And then it just always feels like
we're behind.
And I wish we had been thinking longer term and bigger from the beginning. I think we would have been better prepared. That's it. I mean, it's all come together and you do learn. And so maybe that's something I wish we had thought longer term, but at the same time, there is something that you learn from just making mistakes or
we've probably spent more money than we needed to at times because we've been scrambling to source, you know, things to get ready for a market or you know, so I think that's some of what I've definitely learned is, to Christina's point, is this started out small, just selling some excess honey, and it has just kind of picked up steam, and we've just had so much fun with it that, you know, we're trying to do lots of different things and try different things, and because that's not, you know, and we're doing it in a very compressed time frame, that has some downsides and some negative things, and it probably has cost us more money than it should have had. And then I like there's a question up on the Q&A, any happy accidents. One really quick funny story. It was about 2 years ago, I think now. We had a hive, and it was a pretty angry, they got a little testy. They got a little testy, they got a little angry, and we weren't sure. We never had an angry hive before, so we were trying to figure out, what do we do with this hive? And we were talking to some local beekeepers. Well, they swarmed, and when what that means is the queen and several thousand bees leave the hive. And this has happened to us before, and we usually can catch them and put them back. Well, this time they chose our neighbor's second story house above their garage. And these neighbors had just moved in and we had never met them. So the first time we met them was knocking on their door saying, there's about 20 or 30,000 honeybees on the side of your house above your garage. Here's a bottle of honey. We'll get them back. Just give us, a couple hours. You might not want to go outside for a few minutes. And so we got the ladders and boxes and smokers, and we got them back in the box and we took them back home. But that was kind of our happy little accident again.
Was it happy?
Yeah, it wasn't happy at the moment. Normally a bee swarm is they're very docile, and you can handle them with bare hands. These ladies were quite feisty, and we ended up having to give them away because they were a bit much for our neighborhood. So that's kind of our happy accident.
We met our neighbors.
Yeah, we met the neighbors, and they got a free bottle of honey. So.
Eddie?
Yeah, I think for me, it's not knowing all the things that I would need to be doing on the marketing side, that, just creating my products, coming up with my recipes and the branding and all that gets it to my shelf, getting it out the door. As much as I love my friends, it's not like all my friends are buying 10 or 12 of these a month to replenish. So you at some point do need other people to know about what you're doing and what you're selling. And again, it's a product I feel confident about. So I love when it gets out there. I love when people are using it. But I'm not active on YouTube. I don't do a lot of my self-cooking kinds of things. It didn't occur to me that I would need to be not just the voice behind the product, but the showman in front of the product as well, for a lot of things. And I've missed some opportunities because I wasn't ready. So I'm trying to be better about that, going into some of these retail arrangements. I need recipe cards. I need some videos of me out in, when I'm hunting, when I'm camping, using my products. So I need to be a little bit more conscious now about, how I'm selling and how I'm putting my story out there. As far as things that I would not change, I love the recipes I've come up with. I've thought about at some point varying some of the ingredients when there's things in bulk that I could get cheaper. But I can't imagine any things that I would swap out without thinking about it as a totally different blend. So I love coming up with the recipes that I have and how I use them, and that they're pretty utilitarian. So, I wouldn't change any of the recipes that I've come up with and kind of the formula that I've been using.
Great. I want to thank you guys both, or all three of you, so much for your time this afternoon. I think it's been really interesting. And I want to thank all of you guys who've attended thanks for coming by and listening to this first program in our series. Our next program is going to move from food to the arts. We're going to have Sean Joyce from Underground Comedy talking about what it's like setting up under a comedy scene in DC, and we'll also have Leah Gage from Brenda about running house venues in DC and also being in a touring band in the area. So that will be on February 12th. But in the meantime, grill some meat, spice it up, put a little honey on your toast, and be sure to find, it sounds like you can find both of these vendors online or at Made in Alex. And thank you guys again.
Thank you.
Come into
Thanks,
the
everybody.
library, we're open.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.